Delighted to welcome the Environment Secretary George Eustice to the show. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Oh, obviously, I know there are issues that you want to talk about under your remit for the environment, but obviously lots of concern today about the latest coronavirus figures. UK death toll hitting 60,000 UK-wide. 367 deaths reported yesterday. Always an uptick on a Tuesday, as we know, with lots of those weekend deaths reported. But now we're told that Downing Street are looking at a second wave, more deadly than the first, and that SAGE has advised a second lockdown. Are we going to be in lockdown before Christmas?
Well, we don't think at the moment that there's a case for a lockdown. We've always been clear that we don't rule anything out. We keep options open. But parts of the country at the moment have a very low incidence of the disease, and a lockdown's not justified. If you look at Cornwall or many other parts of the southeast, the incidence of the virus has remained quite low. So we think the approach we've got at the moment, which is observing all parts of the country to go by the rule of 6 and not to meet in large gatherings, but then escalating interventions for those that have got the greatest incidence, is the right approach. It's more targeted, it's a regional and city-based approach, and we think it's the appropriate action to take to balance the importance of keeping our economy going and having regard for people's well-being and mental health, with the imperative of checking the spread of the virus.
But there is ongoing pressure from SAGE. It's very easy for those whose only concern is the number of COVID deaths, not the number of deaths from, we're seeing excess deaths at the moment, not from COVID, but from people dying from other untreated diseases because of the focus on COVID. But also those people who don't have to be concerned about the long-term effects mentally, physically and economically of a lockdown. Do you think the pressure eventually is going to get to the government, and as other countries, France looking at a second lockdown, Italy, Spain and others, as that happens, that actually we are going to inevitably end up going from tier 1 to tier 2 to tier 3 across the country? We're all in tier 3 and eventually we will be in a second lockdown.
Well, I think the point is the government's got to strike a balance and make the right judgment with the evidence it's got before it. And the truth is that SAGE did a report and had a meeting back in September. They set out this so-called circuit breaker, a mini short-term lockdown, as one option, but they were clear it was only one option, that the impacts of it couldn't be guaranteed because it would only be for short-term for 2 weeks, and that there might therefore be a need to extend it even further. They also pointed out that there could be mortality from deaths by other causes and issues with people's mental health and the economy. So they themselves recognise that this is a difficult balance to strike. They set out a range of options, and we followed some of those options. It's the policy that we've outlined with these 3 different levels of intervention.
Can we talk about this letter from the Red Wall rebels, the 55 Northern MPs, the Tory MPs from the Northern Research Group, who wrote to the Prime Minister, a letter that was leaked to the papers yesterday? Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, said he shares their frustrations, but they were saying we need a roadmap out. We need an exit strategy. Can you tell me, we know what the rules are effective for moving from tier 1 to tier 2 to tier 3. We've seen an awful lot of the north of the country move into tier 3. What are the rules for exiting? How will any part of the country, Greater Manchester, Liverpool, wherever, how will they leave tier 3 to go back to tier 2? How will London leave tier 2 and go back to tier 1? What are the signals? What's the data that's going to push us back down a tier?
Well, look, we've not set out sort of fixed points.
Why not?
Because I don't think that's the right way to do it, because you'll always have to have an element of a subjective decision about not just the prevalence of the virus, but also whether there are particular environments where it's prone to spreading. But broadly speaking, they will move back down to the tier 1, if you like, once the conditions are similar to tier 1. And they're not there yet, and they will move up to the very high risk tier 3 when the conditions require it. And that's why yesterday Warrington was added with an agreement with local leaders there, and why there's discussion with Nottingham that's ongoing, because they're probably also needing to go into that very high risk category. I mean, I think we've got the right approach, which is a targeted one, where we have the appropriate level of intervention that correlates really to the prevalence of the virus.
There's a big concern about Christmas Day. Victoria Derbyshire was forced to backtrack and apologise for saying that, as the BBC presenter, that she was planning to have 7 people for Christmas lunch, Christmas Day, so she didn't leave out elderly members of her family and would break the rule of 6. Police and Crime Commissioner for West Midlands, David Jameson, has said that police officers will be sent to break up family dinners if they breach the rules. Currently, of course, in Greater Manchester and West Midlands and elsewhere, a lot of places not actually allowed to have household gatherings indoor at all. Forget the rule of 6, not allowed to have grandparents over or aunts or uncles. Do you think that genuinely that the British people are going to put up with that on Christmas Day?
Well, look, let's hope it doesn't come to that. The Prime Minister...
Hope? Is that what we do in this free and democratic society? We just hope that we don't have the police barging in our doors, breaking up our Christmas dinner with our grandparents. Is that how we're living now?
The point I was going to make here, these extraordinary measures that we're having to put in place are, yes, very draconian, but they are emergency measures and they are short-term measures. And I think most people understand why what's being done needs to be done. But the Prime Minister's been clear. He wants people to be able to enjoy a family Christmas in a way that's as close to possible as normal. It's too early, you'll appreciate, for us to be able to say yet exactly what restrictions will be pertaining in different parts of the country at that time. It's a fast developing situation. We're responding, almost day by day, week by week, to an emerging picture with the spread of the virus. But our aim is that people will be able to enjoy a family Christmas as close to possible as normal. Now, whether that will be able to be very large gatherings with all of the cousins and 20 or so coming over to a house, whether that will be possible, well, perhaps it won't be, but people can still enjoy family Christmas, and that's what we want to be able to support.
But this is the thing, you and I know that the rule of 6 won't apply on Christmas Day because everyone will make a mockery of that, and you don't want scenes of police officers banging down doors, so you're going to relax the rule but in time for Christmas Day, because extraordinarily the virus has its own calendar and doesn't kill grannies on Christmas Day but does on, say, the 23rd of December. Do you understand why a lot of people think this is nonsense?
Well, look, I do understand that when you introduce, as we've had to, emergency measures of this sort, that are a major infringement on people's liberty. There's no doubt about that. We don't pretend otherwise, but they're necessary to try to manage the spread of the virus. I do understand, of course, why people will get frustrated by that. And as time goes on, they will find that harder and harder to accept. That's why we've got to find a way out of this. That's why the work on vaccines and so forth is so important, so that we can get a solution to this virus and then move back to living our lives in a normal way.
Okay, and we saw this on another topic entirely, these horrific deaths of 2 adults, 2 children, possibly a baby as well, also died in this migrant crossing. Who's to blame for those deaths?
Well, look, it's a terrible tragedy, and I know that the authorities in France, in Dunkirk, have started an investigation and doing further work in this area. The people that are to blame for these deaths are those callous gangs that take money from vulnerable people to send them on their way, trying to make a very dangerous crossing across the channel. Those are the people that are to blame. We've made some 3,000 interventions, that's the French authorities and UK authorities, 3,000 interventions to stop crosses by dinghies of this sort this year. This is a terrible problem, but these people are in safe countries. They're in France, they're in a safe country. There is no rationale for them to try to make that journey. They're being encouraged to do so by these callous gangs, and those are the ones
they're not being encouraged to do so. There's a market because these people want to do it. Do you not think the parents who put their young children on a boat in rough seas in terrible conditions bear some responsibility?
Well, in many cases, they're probably not aware of the full dangers. And these gangs are basically promoting and selling a dream of getting to the UK to these people. And they're doing so in order to extort money from them and then put them in a dinghy and send them on their way. That is what's so tragic. And those are the people that are to blame in this situation.
OK, just finally, George Eustice, as Environment Secretary, let's talk about your remit. And you are looking at getting sort of evidence on proposals for managing 5 of England's marine protected areas. Tell us about that.
Yes, well, when we leave the European Union, we're able to do more in terms of putting in place protected areas, but also management measures for those areas. And we have around 40% of the waters, our inshore waters, are covered now by marine protected areas of some sort. But those that are further out and that are beyond 12 miles, we need to get the agreement of all the other affected EU countries before we can introduce measures. And that's been a particular bone of contention, for instance, around places like the Dogger Bank in the North Sea, which is a very valuable marine ecosystem. but where we've never been able to get other EU countries to agree a sensible package of measures. Once we leave the EU, we've got powers in the Fisheries Bill that means we can unilaterally take action to protect these areas.
Okay, finally, once we're finally out that transition period. George Eustice, Environment Secretary, thank you very much indeed. Sorry for some of that background noise. If you're watching the video, you'll see he's outside Westminster, quite a lot of traffic going by. I really appreciate you joining us.